In today's video I will play audio from the Kieran McCarthy interview discussing the issues that plagued the Atari VCS. It is eerie how similar everything is with the Intellivision Amico. I found many parallels with him and the Tommy drama featuring Pat and Ian, Leo DS, and the Geek Getaway. Enjoy.
It's easy. It's not hard. It's like anything. You know it. You know it when you see it. If someone is really trying to make a product happen, and they're all in on that, you can just tell because they're keen to communicate with people. They're also, the toughest part is taking criticism on board from people who aren't in your organization. So that can be very hard because a lot of people won't know what's really going on. So it can be very difficult to hear criticism or critiques of what you're doing if you're in the middle of it and if you're working hard. But if someone does do that and they say to people, I hear you and here's what we're going to do about it, that's when you know you've got a strong likelihood of it happening. When people are, when they're listening, because they're thinking about the user, they're thinking about their product, that's when you know that there's a pro behind it. If they don't do that, and especially if someone critiques it and they start having a go at them, attacking them, being personally unpleasant, that's when you know you've got a crazy person behind it, that this is about their ego and not about the actual product. So it's not difficult to tell. We all instinctively know it. I think some people allow their biases to ignore what's really going on and the personality types. But in terms of identifying someone who is going to produce a good product, it's really not difficult. Are their communications good? Are they consistent? Do they update people? Do they listen to criticism in a healthy way? And that's it. And if they're doing that, there's a strong likelihood it'll happen. And then they sort of put out some updates on it, which were a little odd. So I dug into it a little bit deeper and I realized that, oh, hang on, there's something not right about this. They started talking about how it was going to be the same as a PC console. It was going to be sort of have 4K, and it was going to. And I thought that's a crazy idea, especially with the PlayStation coming up, which was then going to be a year away, and the new Xbox. And I thought that's absolutely crazy. What are they thinking? That's not going to work. They need to do this retro console. But then they announced they were going to launch, which I thought was highly improbable, given that this is a piece of hardware. And it's quite a lot of work to produce a piece of hardware. And they reckon they were going to launch it within 6 months. I thought there's no way this is going to happen. And sure enough, it didn't. So literally the day before they said they were going to launch, they canceled it. So that was a huge red flag. And I thought, well, that's that idea. That's dead. And that's when I ended up sort of in this, not in the actual games conference, but in this suite in the hotel, the Marriott, just sort of over the road from Moscone, which I immediately thought was odd. And it was just inside a hotel room. And the implication was that, there would be this prototype. And then I had the strangest conversation with the Atari COO, Michael Arts. And it very quickly dawned on me that this guy didn't know what the hell he was doing at all. I mean, at all. And so I had this weird conversation where I went, I thought, this would be fun, and sat down and I said, and none of it worked. I mean, at all. And it was just a box, and it was quite a heavy box. And I said, so what's in it? And he couldn't tell me. I asked basic questions, what's the interface? Couldn't tell me. How's this work? Couldn't tell me. Then they picked up the control, and it was literally a molded piece of plastic. And then then there's the classic Atari controller. So I picked that up and I said, oh, because it moved. Does this work? No. Well, so I just kept asking questions, and it became very clear very quickly that he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. He was talking about, he was saying this was, like trying to launch, he was talking about NASA. And I said, this isn't NASA, this is a games console. And then how he couldn't show me things, and they were thinking about getting a new chip and all this stuff, which I imagine would, if people were excited about it and didn't really know much about hardware or product development or technology, i.e. weren't a tech journalist, that they might go for. I mean, he was sort of excited about it, winging it a bit. But when he literally couldn't answer any questions at all, I thought, this is a total bust. These guys, they don't know what they're doing. They put out an idea and they got a lot of interest, and they did. They raised millions of dollars on Indiegogo. And so I thought, they don't know what they're doing. So I wrote an article basically saying, this is never going to happen. This is a disaster. The COO doesn't know what he's doing. And they got very upset about that. I didn't realize until months later. I imagined they'd been upset by it, but that's not my problem. Except then someone sent me a message months later, which said they are calling you a troll on their Facebook page. So they're launching again, trying to get more money for this concept, which they clearly hadn't even started. And someone found my article and said, "Can you explain this? Why your COO doesn't understand any of these fundamental factors?" And they wrote this response, which was, well, I suppose something like, you get irresponsible trolls, and it really, really slagged off my article, saying that I had written a story that I wanted to write rather than one that was actually happened or discussed. So this got under my skin as a professional journalist, but fortunately I'd recorded the whole thing. So I dug out, fortunately I still had it. I mean, I have tapes of most of my interviews. So I dug out the interview, and we posted a story in which I just put the full interview up, audio, and it was quite good audio because I had a good recording device, and I also split it up. And so each bullet point where, I just went through each bullet point of my story and put the audio underneath it. Basically, I wrote exactly what happened. So at that point, that imagine Atari was very irritated, but you can't go around accusing professional journalists of being trolls, especially when you've got a tape of it. So from that point on, I thought, right, I would just follow this thing to the death. And so every couple of months, it would occur to me, I wonder what's happening with the Atari VCS. So that's what I did. Every couple of months, I would look in and basically write a story going, oh my God, it's got worse. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And the price point kept going up to the point where it was almost the same as a new PlayStation. And then the specs wouldn't come out. And then when the specs did come out, it was so woefully underpowered, it was clearly not going to be able to do anything. And then I heard a rumor that they were having major production problems. So I started reaching out to people and found out. You and I say this because we have some understanding of technology and gaming and hardware. I don't think they had any understanding of that at all. Like Michael Arts, when I talked to him at this weird, hotel meeting, he was talking about chipsets, and there's another new chipset coming out, and that's even more powerful. And I said to him, "There's always a new chipset. It's like he was literally learning about chipsets for the first time in his life." And I said, "There is literally always a new chipset. That's the entire market. You can, in 6 months' time, there'll be another new chipset. You've got to make the call, get the specs, make the call, lock it down." This is absolutely basic. So when the COO was getting excited about the concept of chipsets, I thought, he has no idea what he's doing. Absolutely no idea. So if they'd have been smart about it, they'd have hired someone who knew what they were doing.
I agree. And I don't necessarily want to be down on the pure concept of it, but it was just the way they got to the finish line. It was frustrating at how many wrong turns they took. And yet anybody who called them out was just shut down, or they were, in your case, called a liar, which is absurd.
And so you will not believe the conversation I just had with the COO of Atari. Like, "Oh, is it going to be exciting?" I said, "No, it's going to be an absolute disaster." So they're like, "Oh my God, well, what are you going to write about?" I said, "I'm going to write what a disaster it is. People are going to love it." So there was a kind of amusement. At the same time, I thought, this is going to be so much fun because I can just put the literal recordings of this guy out there. So on that level, I sort of kind of enjoyed the ability to rub it in their face. I don't think it had any strong impact. People still behind it, but I hope they learned not to do that. It's just a bad idea to be unprofessional when someone is a professional. So I hope they learned that lesson.
Indeed, it's a level of professionalism, not just toward the media, which is an issue by itself, but you have to figure if they're treating the media like that, how are they looking at their customers? Because as a potential customer of theirs, I don't feel like they treated us with any sort of sense of honesty or respect.
No, their communications were shameful. It was really bad. And also their PR company, who a pretty good PR company, were really unnecessarily aggressive. And I don't know why they did that. I think people just get big ideas, and as soon as they have some money, they imagine that they have power. But that's not really the case. You're going to have power for a very short period of time, but ultimately people will remember it. I remember everyone involved and how they reacted to people, and their credibility is significantly lower from now on. And you know, the tech industry is fairly big. The game industry is pretty small. That will count against them for a long period of time. But I think when people have money, they kind of lose track of that, and their worst parts, their personality, come out.
I just think that games have been around long enough. The tech industry has been around long enough. We should have higher expectations for how companies treat their customers.
Yeah, there should be. You know, I'd love to think that people will be a little bit harsher on the next one and the next one.